Thank you.
Next problem I have, our friends, our partners at BetMGM throwing this tweet. We were going back and forth last night on a number of things, but I like this one. Who will be the best pitcher in baseball in 5 years? And I replied and said we'd cover it on the show today. So who wants to start? Kratzy, you got a guy for us? Best pitcher in baseball in 5 years is?
Man, after I even said it when we talked about it, I feel like the easy one is just going right down to Miami to Sandy Alcantara.
Mm-hmm.
But for discussion's sake, I think our mind always goes to starting pitchers. Like, don't sleep on Emmanuel Clase. Like, a closer that's going to be around in 5 years, 30 years old, like he could be an Edwin Diaz type of closer. So it's not just, your Logan Gilbert, somebody that I thought of too was, kind of on the come up in Seattle. But I have a tough time betting against anybody but Sandy right now because he's a workhorse and he gets after. He's already got one Cy Young. He could be in 5 years. He'd be looking at his third one.
Before we get to ours, I heard there was some back and forth, or I saw it too, between you and BetMGM because somebody named Chuckles goes, probably Kratz. And they said, what a career arc that would be. And then you replied, I'm a great BP pitcher. Do you throw a great BP?
All catchers do.
Luscious
do,
BP.
right?
That's like a well-known, unwritten rule kind of thing. If
Yeah.
you got a catcher out there,
it's really it's the arm slot. It's the, your short arm slot. It's always going to be four seam. You're never getting some random cut. And yeah, it's luscious BP. You can ask the boys at Doc, the high school I coach at. It's legit BP. There's very few things I boast about besides my TikTok legacy and my batting practice.
The legacy continues, just like the Masters.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Exactly. Who you got? Who's your best pitcher in 5 years in the sport? Remember, it's 5 years down the road. Like I was looking up. Sandy's 32 in 5 years, which is still fine, but I'm saying guys regress at some point.
You could call me crazy, but I'm sticking with Shohei Ohtani, man. I still think, I don't care what age he is, the Japanese, they age well, man. They're like fine wine. So I'm going to stick with him. People they might say he might injuries, this and that, with the arm, hitting a lot on him. But I don't see him slowing down for one, and I just see him keep getting better and better. So for me, it has to be Shohei, and eventually, we never know what's going to happen. Maybe he just becomes a hitter. I mean, maybe he just becomes a pitcher. I don't see that, but what he's doing right now, I could see in 5 years still being the same.
I got Spencer Strider. I'll go Strider at 24. In 5 years, he'll be 29. And he's just getting going in terms of figuring himself out as a pitcher. Yeah. He only needed to use 2 pitches last year.
Yeah.
Now he's starting to mix in the changeup a little bit more. I mean, 5 years from now, he might have 4 pitches.
I got his rookie card signed, so that's a good sign for me.
I got you.
I appreciate
exactly.
that.
And right now, odds-wise for NL Cy Young as of last night, the favorite was Alcantara.
Of course.
And Strider was 2.
That's
Strider
awesome.
Looked filthy last night. The only thing that would hold him back on the short term from, say, winning a Cy this year, in my mind, is if the Braves are still being careful with him. Like guy in his low to mid 20s, they're like, we don't want to get too close to 200 or too far over 200 innings. Where Alcantara's on the Marlins. He's going to go, listen, we're not making the playoffs. Get the hell off my mound. I'm going 9 today. Exactly. Strider doesn't have the same pull because they're going to go, hey, dude, you got to play an extra month of baseball.
Exactly.
But in 5 years, when he can just rack up 215 innings or something like that, I think
it could be some young cat coming up all of a sudden in like 3 years.
Yes.
Boom, just taking off, kind of like DeGrom kind of did.
Or Strider. Last year, no one was talking about him until...
he did great, but same time, we weren't really and he's still not, I don't think he's still in that conversation yet.
Okay.
Of being like, oh, listen, he's top 5.
You don't think he's a Cy Young contender in the National League?
I didn't say that. I did. Not yet. It's game. He's only pitched 2 games. I want to see more over the long haul, Eric. I mean, at the end of the day, career, years, he's still got a long way to go for me.
I think you're looking at a guy, I equate him to a hitter who is just absolutely unleashing everything he's got on every swing. And I think Strider's fastball, everybody's fastball regresses, except for Justin Verlander and anybody in the early 2000s. Your fastball regresses when you're already at 99 to 100. And if this changeup thing, if it hits, yeah, great. He's going to need to mix that in. But that fastball, all of a sudden, you saw what happens when it gets flat. The ball was flying in the playoffs. Like he couldn't shut it down. And I think a guy like Strider, he's got to really be able to work on that secondary stuff to be what we're talking about, like a top 5 pitcher. And I would agree with you, Todd. I don't think he's a top 5 pitcher right now. I would take the field. If you're taking Strider for the Cy Young, I'm taking the field.
Well, duh. I mean, that gives you.
Hey, that was the easiest comment I've ever heard come out. Like he said that so smooth. Like, I'm taking the field.
I'm taking the rest of the pitchers.
I'm waiting for a comment like, why aren't you saying the same thing? Well, duh. Yeah.
No doubt.
Hey, no
doubt. Hey,
my thing is, I don't think the fastball, though, I get it, is going to decline in his 20s still. Like, we see it start to dip. I could see, a guy like that, he's in his early 30s, and you're like, hey, now he's only sitting 93, 4, 5, whatever. But for me, I just think 5 years from now, if you ask me 7 years from now, the answer might be different. But 5 years from now, I could see it, especially if he adds to his repertoire and because of the zip he has on his fastball. I mean, last year, what he was able to do really with 2 pitches, and often he would just use the heater for basically the first few innings, to me is special. So, yes, there's injury risk and there's fastball reliant risk. But that's where I look at a guy like him, and I'm like, I think he can punch out the world. That's the other important part for me. I think, and this is crazy, front offices are going to value swing and miss out of pitchers more than ever because of shift restrictions, in my opinion, because there are balls already getting through that weren't getting through before. So if you're a contact guy, I just think that's the way front office brains think. Every time a ball is put in play, there's a risk that something can happen.
Yeah.
If a ball is not put in play because my dude's striking out the world, then he is more value to me. That was already the case.
Yeah.
Now base hits are coming through left and right. Like you see a little dribbler and it gets through the infield or up the middle's back, which is cool. But that means if you're a contact guy, they're going to ding you. So for me, that's what gives Strider a little more oomph. What do you think, Brad? Wait, one more thing. In the playoffs, he was coming off. He hadn't pitched for like a month and a half. And then he just, here, you're back. And I think he had it for 3 innings. And I would have been like, okay, good, you're done. You haven't pitched more. I mean, he hadn't pitched at all in a long time. They should have just pulled the plug quicker.
And I'm not saying his velocity is going to go down. When I say a downtick in his fastball, what you see guys that are like that don't have that secondary solidified, a third pitch that you can throw in there maybe 10 to 15% of the time. That fastball, they catch up to it. And not that they're catching up to his 99. It's just the same perceived velocity is not the same. And you just get that downtick in, I would say in 3 years from now, Strider has to make adjustments, being a shorter pitcher too, that are going to keep his fastball relevant. Is he going to throw one that cuts a little bit? Is he going to throw one, is he going to mix in that changeup 15 to 20% of the time? That's where I'm seeing it. I don't think his velocity is going to go down in the next 5 years. And I hate when guys are like, oh, well, you never know about injury. Like every single person we bring up today, you don't know about injury. There's nobody. That's a mute point. That's like my saying, I'll take the field over Strider.
Exactly. That's mute.